Welcome everybody, let's get right to it. The first step in painting the elevator obviously is removing it from the airplane. So I'm pulling out the hinge here, removing the elevator, and I have a little paint stand that I borrowed from my neighbor that I will set it on. Step one, when I built this airplane, I primed all of the parts, and I primed them with this Napa 7220 self-etching primer. Now this is a great primer for interior parts of the airplane, but I really don't want it on the outside of the airplane where parts are going to get painted. So I want to take this primer off so that the SPI epoxy primer that I have can really get a good bite into the aluminum. So MEK will take this off pretty easily. That's what I'm going to do next on anything on the outside that will be painted. Do you guys see this little dent right there and this little dent right there? I'm going to fix that before I prime this, and I'll show you what that is from. You'll notice on the very back part of this big plate that mounts the horizontal stabilizer, I've angled the back of these because before I angled this or trimmed the corners off on both sides, when the elevator was down, it was hitting this, and that's what put those dents in the elevator. So now with the full down travel, I've kind of cut the corners off here and it no longer hits. Now to fill that, I'm using this icing that I bought on Amazon. I think it's about $20 for this big tube. It'll last you pretty much forever. And the reason I'm using this is because this dries within minutes. So I don't have to wait overnight to let that dry and then sand it. I can put this on, wait just a few minutes, sand it off smooth, and then continue with priming. All right, I have 2 buckets of water here. I have one with Dawn dish soap and another one with just clean water and a clean rag in it. And just like I showed you in the previous video, I'm going to take a Scotch spray pad and just scuff up the entire surface of the elevator. So I'll continue with the top and bottom on the whole elevator. Once it's done, I'll let it dry, then I'll clean it with that degreaser and dewaxer and hang it in the paint booth and be ready for primer. Anytime I wipe something off with a really wet rag, I blow it out with compressed air. And as you can kind of see here, it just really forces the water out of the rivets and in the seams where the aluminum overlaps. Just helps everything dry faster. This is the SPI epoxy primer I've mixed up. It mixes 1-to-1, but follow the directions for whatever brand of primer you're using. I dump it through this strainer here just in case there's any little lumps in the paint as I mixed it. So always use a tack rag to wipe down your parts right before you paint or prime. And that just gets any little lint or dust off. These are 2 fairings. This is the elevator fairing right here. And stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to show you this, where that fairing goes. Then I wipe down the entire elevator, and after you're done wiping it down, you're ready to go. All right, I won't bore you with making you watch the whole entire process, but what I do when I prime or paint is I start with all the edges and I spray those, and then I move on to the bigger surfaces. So I just got the two edges, and the video is sped up here just in case if you haven't noticed. But I did the top, basically all around the perimeter, and then I did the top and bottom. All right, today's day 2 of painting the elevator and the trim tab. Trim tab came out perfect. It's in the house, I don't have it right here. Now I want to talk about the elevator because I want to, hopefully you guys will learn from my mistakes. So my elevator, when I painted it, I got a lot of dust in it. And as like I mentioned on the other video, it's not dust that's settling in the drying paint. It comes right from the paint gun. And you can't see on the screen. I tried to film it on here, but with the lens I have, it doesn't pick it up. If you look at this panel here, from these rivets over, there's almost no dust at all. And for the rest of the elevator, there's quite a bit of those little nibs or dust in the primer. During painting this, I think I finally figured out what causes that. Where I got all these little dust particles in there, when it comes right from the gun, I was holding the gun too close to the surface when I was spraying. And I kind of thought that might be the issue. So as I was working down and I painted this one, I moved the gun further away, and just like magic, there's almost no dust in this at all. It's almost just perfectly smooth. So that's kind of another key to learning how to paint, is really just getting that muscle memory of how far away from the surface to hold the paint gun. They say 6 to 8 inches, and I think that's a good distance. When I was painting all this, for some reason, I don't know why, but I was just holding it probably 4 inches away from the surface, so it was closer than it should have been. And I think what happens is that paint doesn't have time to atomize properly or 100%, so it's getting little basically globs of paint on the surface. Now to remove those, it's not the end of the world. They have these little, they sell these on Amazon. It's basically a little file with a piece of wood attached to it. And it's made to go in one direction. And what you do is you take it over the surface like this, and it just gets rid of those, we call them nibs, those little pieces of dust. And it does a pretty good job of it. And then once you're done there, and what's nice is the edges don't dig into the surface either, so it doesn't really scratch your paint. It really just kind of gets those dust particles gone. So what I'll do on this is I'll use this thing to go over the surface to remove all those, and I'll sand the whole thing down with 320 grit sandpaper. And I've already done the bottom surface, and it just comes out perfect. It's really nice and smooth. So that's it. We'll get this prepared, and then it's ready for paint. After using that little block with a file on it, I used sandpaper to get rid of the little dust nibs. And now I'm just using a Scotch-Brite pad to go over the entire surface to scuff it up to get it ready for paint. And just like the primer, I mixed up the paint according to the directions. I dump it through a strainer into the paint gun, and it is ready to go. Alright, so I'm painting these pieces here. On the kind of right under my arm is the base of the vertical stabilizer. What I'm painting right now is the fairing that goes on the wing. And one of the things I've noticed is when you paint small parts like this fairing I'm painting right now, the paint goes on absolutely beautifully. There's zero orange peel, very little dust, it looks great. When I paint a little bit bigger pieces like this, that's when I start to get a little bit of orange peel and a little bit more dust on the surface. And I think it just has to do with how far away the gun is from the surface, how much paint I'm putting on, and even the speed that I'm going over it. So I think that's just a technique that I have to learn. And hopefully every piece I paint will keep getting better and better. This is obviously the elevator. Just like the primer, I'm painting all the edges first. And what I'm doing now is I'm using that ladder just to hold it a little more horizontal so I can get to the edge. So I'm just going to go around here and paint all the edges. And then we'll put the first coat is kind of a light dust coat. Let that dry for about 15 minutes, and then I come back and put on the second coat, and if it needs it, a third coat. Alright, here is the final product. This is the elevator painted and done. I'm happy with it, but I'm not 100% happy with it. There's a little bit of orange peel in the paint. If you can, it might not show up too much on the camera, but there's a little bit of orange peel in it. There's also, like right there, you can see there's still a couple specks of dust here and there. Actually more than a couple. There's some dust in it. I'm just hoping later maybe I can see, you can see a couple pieces there. Maybe later I can buff it out. But that's it, it's done. Now I want to show you one more thing. Alright, the last thing I want to show you, which I think is pretty cool, I'll show you on the other side is the elevator trim tab servo. And there's a hole about right here, and it comes out, and there's a wire that runs all the way down to the center and goes into the fuselage to connect up to, you know, your trim switch. Zenith gives you these little standoffs right here, if the camera will focus on that. And what you do is you rivet them on like this, you put a couple, and then the cable comes out, or the wire, and it just gets zip tied on there. And it works fine, but it doesn't look cool. So I want to show you what I did. Alright, here is where that servo trim wire comes out of the elevator. And I made this fiberglass fairing that you can see that's where it comes out. The grommet fits under there. The cable makes the wire makes a 90-degree turn. And then it's just this real nice looking fairing that comes down here. And on the end is where the cable comes out. So this right here will be the center of the fuselage. So this will all be inside the fuselage. And then instead of having those white clamps and the wire just kind of zip tied, I have a real nice fiberglass fairing here that I made and then painted. You can see it on there like that. Just gives it a real nice professional, clean look. I think it looks really cool and much better than that wire just zip tied on there. Okay everybody, thank you so much for watching this video. It was a lot of work to film, but we went through the very first steps of getting the elevator ready to paint, priming it, fixing some flaws in the primer, sanding it down, and then putting the final coat of blue paint on it. Make sure you liked the video. If you would, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and don't click off just yet. As the outro, I'm going to show you a couple other parts that I've painted that look pretty cool.